Let's look back at what Jordan Love was coming out of college. And I think it will help us project forward what he can be in the NFL. I talked to Gary Andersen, his coach at Utah State, back in 2020 about Jordan Love, the person, about Jordan Love, the player, about the excuses that are being made for him, about the questions, the criticisms, the strengths, the weaknesses, all of it. And it is an appropriate time to get back to that place. He helps us get set for the 2023 season when Jordan Love will control the Green Bay Packers' future. All of that starts right now.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. The rumors, they're all over the place on the latest with Aaron Rodgers. I don't want to talk about that. I really don't. And I'm really glad that we don't have to, because I really just don't want to talk about it. I'm kind of over it at the moment. Tomorrow I might feel differently, but right now I'm very glad that we have this episode to share with you. Gary Andersen, former University of Wisconsin-Madison head coach, but more importantly, in this case, he was the Utah State head coach before he went to Wisconsin, and then went back to Utah State, coached Jordan Love, and understood there were real explanations for the play of Jordan Love. And I keep going back to this, and I have a number of times over the last couple years. When a college head coach says in real time, like when the players that he's talking directly about are still on the team, I take notice of this. You're about to hear this. Gary Andersen talks about the players that come in and essentially says they weren't ready. Jordan Love was ready to run this offense. We couldn't run the offense we wanted to do. And I think, the more Packer specific point is he says he thinks Jordan Love will be a better pro than he was a collegiate player. But for Gary Andersen to say the guys that Jordan Love had that season, coming off the season before when he was terrific, you lose a lot of those pieces. And then you've got these new guys you got to get up to speed. Those new guys he had to get up to speed were the guys that were going to have to play for Utah State that upcoming season. And Gary Andersen is still going, yeah, those guys, they didn't know what they were doing. Those things stand out to me. And so I think this is a really interesting way to frame what's going on with Jordan Love, to think about what he was as a prospect, why he fell the way that he did, and to understand there were a lot of evaluators that thought he was a much better player than he ended up being drafted as. And you go back and look at the combine, the post-combine mocks, he's going in the top 10. He is in the DeForest Buckner spot before that DeForest Buckner trade. Has the Colts trading for him. A top 15 player. That's not obviously what happened, but that was the way it was being framed at the combine. He killed the combine. So just, I think, important perspective as we head into this season with Jordan Love, Gary Andersen, and my conversation from a couple years ago. For YouTube fans, I appreciate you being here. This was before we were on YouTube, so the audio here does not have video to go along with it. Not a huge deal, in my opinion. You're still going to get all of the great information from Gary Andersen, but I just wanted it to be clear. The next 20 or so minutes really an audio format here as we move forward. So if you want to go listen instead of watching on YouTube, I understand it, but I just wanted you to have the information before I move forward. Here we go. All right, let's talk now to Gary Andersen, the Utah State head coach, formerly the Badgers head coach, also formerly the old Utah State head coach. He came back after a 2018 season for Jordan Love that basically got Jordan Love's coach at Utah State hired at Texas Tech. That's how good Jordan Love was in 2018. That's how good Utah State was in 2018. He took a step back. So let's figure out why that happened, and let's get some insight on what kind of person Jordan Love is. Matt LaFleur in his post-draft press conference talked about really liking the person. They loved the kid. That was the phrasing Brian Gutekunst used. They love the player, first of all, but they love the person. So I wanted to get a little bit more insight from someone who had spent time around him. So we got his head coach from last year. Now, I do want to just give you a little bit of a heads up. The audio quality is not going to be what you're used to. This is quarantine, so we had to be a little bit creative with how we put this together, but there's a lot of really good information in there. We cleaned the audio up as best we could. I think after a minute or two, you'll get used to it, and there is a lot of good information in there, so hopefully we can move past the audio deficiencies and take the substance of what's being said here. You won't remember this, but we talked a few years back when you were at Wisconsin for a Sports Illustrated profile. So it's nice to talk to you again, is what I'm saying.
Talk to you, especially under this circumstances with a good kid.
Yeah, that's obviously what we're all trying to figure out here. We get to watch him play. You get to talk to him. You get to be around him. So tell me a little bit about Jordan Love, the guy. What was your first impression when you met him?
Well, he was. I knew him from afar because I had a kid. Jason was on the team here when Jordan was young, and so I had a little bit of a knowledge of him. But upon our return, it was I saw a kid that came off an unbelievable year of football, very, very grounded, very excited about the future from a coaching standpoint, the ability for him to be able to build off the years that he had. So that was kind of first impressions. Just he was very focused and clear real early. He was a great team leader. Past that, became very obvious in our first off season that he was just that. His leadership is not rah guy. He's a very consistent guy. He leads by example, which is said so many times. You hear that. We say that 1,000 times. That's really who Jordan is. He's going to lead by example when he's in the facility. He's going to lead by example, quite frankly, when he's outside of the facility. And I think he gained that respect of his team because he's a self-made guy. And we're definitely a developmental program at Utah State, and he jumped into that, and he came in at whatever he weighed at the beginning. I've heard 156 pounds. I've heard 160 pounds, whatever it may have been. I don't know. I wasn't here. But he looks the part now for an NFL quarterback, and he's made himself that way. But as a person, he grew up, and not to ramble on this part of it, but he's gone through a lot in his life, which has been obviously well documented now. I think that really helped Jordan understand what he wanted and where he wanted to go, and he was driven to get to this point. He has a tremendous mom who is she's a rock star in my opinion. Has been great for Jordan through this whole process. And then the last thing I would say to that is Jordan as a person is Jordan came out early. His communication with me through this whole process was fantastic. Same with mom. It was never any hidden agenda. It was never trying to we got to do this, we got to do that. He had a team last year that he lost 4 all-conference offensive linemen. He lost a tight end to the NFL. He lost a running back to the NFL, and he lost about 75 to 80% of his production in the wide receiver situation that he had. And it was there was never a time where it was woe is me. What's going on? Bop. He had a new coordinator. He had a new head coach. He ground through it all. And at the end, the reason he wanted to come out was because for Jordan Love, and this is my true belief, and his communication with me was it was time for that next adventure. And Jordan didn't have, I'm going to be a first-round draft pick. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. It's my time to go in the NFL. I don't care where I get drafted. I'm going to go, and I'm going to take my shot at it. It's time to do that. And I thought that was pretty unique.
All right, we're going to get back to Gary Andersen in a second, but before we do, the NBA playoffs are almost here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. I just double-checked my Masters bets, for example. I've got some good ones that I feel pretty good about. So FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. You know, the Bucks, they're killing it. They beat the Wizards last night. Looks like they're going to be the #1 overall seed. You can have a lot of fun with some same-game parlays there. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockdown. That's FanDuel.com/lockdown to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and this will be a little bit more difficult for you because you weren't there in 2018 when he had that great season, but you mentioned all of the changeover. One of the things that stood out to me, I was actually just watching the BYU game, and it was remarkable how many times he would hit the top of his drop and he had to point. And I was like, okay, does that mean a guy is not in the right spot? I mean, so was it the kind of thing where he's just trying to get everyone, situated and everyone on the same page, and that's just a work in progress? That takes time, especially with, 19, 20-year-old kids?
I don't know. I don't know if I could really answer that part of the question. I know our offense was designed around Jordan. We did have 2 transfer receivers come in and did really good things for us. The offense was simplistic by design, right? And so now his ability to walk, and I think this is going to be a huge positive for Jordan when he walks into the NFL. There's a lot of learning that he gets to do under a Hall of Famer and obviously a great coaching staff. So I don't know. I couldn't really get into the ifs and the buts and where he was throwing it, how he's going about it. And he was very coachable from our standpoint. He worked his tail off. But I think the next step for him is going to be really, really positive from a learning standpoint because he's extremely, extremely intelligent. He did have 3 coordinators here, and all really good coaches and all really successful coaches. But he did have 3 different styles of coaching and 3 different styles of teaching, and some tweaks in the offense as far as progression reads versus reading a side of the field and all that stuff that comes back with us. So he's been exposed to different systems and ideas within a simplistic offense, which, by design, many of those offenses in college are designed that way to be simple and be fast, and you can't be complex and play fast. And our goal last year was to play fast, so that made it very simplistic. But I think that's going to help him as he grows because he's been exposed to other other coaches and tweak system. Yes.
So if he said to you in this process, and maybe he did, in fact, let's just start with that question. But if he came to you and said, "Coach, what do I need to do to get better, to be the best version of Jordan Love in the NFL?" First of all, did he ask you that? And if he did or didn't, what would or did you say to him?
No, he didn't ask me that. Not in any of those certain terms. When our discussions were much more around just handling the scenarios and the situations and the pressure. So, but if he did ask me that question, I would simply say to Jordan, if there's just going to be, I've never coached in the NFL. I see it from afar. But if we just go back to Wisconsin. Wisconsin was when we were there. I don't know. I'm sure it is with Coach Chris too, with what he does and how they control the run game and what have you, with all their offense that they have. The quarterback had to be a guy that could change things consistently at the line of scrimmage, whether it's the run game, whether it's checking a run to one side or the other, whether it's checking for the throw game and whatever it may be. And my opinion and my guess is that is even much more complex once you walk into the NFL for most systems. That's just me thinking the way that I think about the NFL. So that I would tell him, Jordan, the biggest thing is going to be a sponge, man. This opportunity to get with Rodgers, are you kidding me? And be able to sit there for a couple of years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is, behind that guy and be able to learn. What a tremendous opportunity for him. And that's what I would have just said to him. Be a sponge. Be ready when your number's called. Play great in the preseason when you get that opportunity to play some great games. And all the other stuff, you don't need to worry about him being an outstanding citizen. You don't need to. He'll understand very quickly that when you're a Green Bay Packer, you represent Wisconsin, you represent, Packer Nation, and it's extremely powerful. And I'm sure he gets told that a lot, and they walk him through all that, but he'll accept that and understand that, represent everybody very well.
Yeah, one of the things that you notice when you cut on the tape with Jordan is he can make plays that you just don't see a lot of guys make. And I'm thinking of one in particular against LSU. He rolled to his right and made a throw down the seam, sort of falling to his right, and I was like, that looked like Aaron Rodgers. And there's so much of that. And then at times there's he missed the underneath linebacker. I mean, he threw a pick against BYU twice. It looked almost the exact same. So
those were goals. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I can visualize all three of those plays in my mind. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And the play that I always remember is you can watch him throw the seam ball from the opposite hatch against Wyoming, and it's an unbelievable. That's like, oh my goodness. So yeah, he's got those wild moments in you that it's like, holy cow, this kid can do some things in abnormal positions, abnormal pockets. He's fantastic at that, and he runs good. Good enough, and he's a big kid that I think he plays with great ankles, and he'll learn those things. Obviously there's some throws that we all would like to take back and get back and whatever it may be, but he can wow you. And his opportunity, I think, just this last year, there was times when maybe Jordan did push a little bit, but why wouldn't he? I mean, how couldn't he when he was trying to make the plays that he needed to make for his team to be able to win? And the ultimate thing, I say this every interview that I ever say about him, is watch the bowl game and watch how selfish Jordan was, what Jordan was in the bowl game. He ran in the bowl game. He didn't have to. He didn't have to play, right? If he didn't want to play, he didn't have to play. He was still going to be a first-round pick, in my opinion. And he did not only did he want to play, but he ran more in that game than he ran probably in any other game the whole year to give his team an opportunity to be able to win, because we had a heck of a time blocking him. I think, again, that's him. He can do all those things, but it's all going to be fast now, right? It's going to be bigger, faster, stronger in the league he's playing in now, but he'll be excited about that. And when he makes those mistakes, you can see he'll come out and it doesn't change his game either, which I think is really important for a quarterback.
Yeah, let's finish up here with this. Obviously you're not going to get to coach him next year, but if you were going to be his coach next year, let's say the Packers came to you and said, "Hey, coach, we'd like you to consult on this." Put what positions offensively in terms of scheme, the kind of things you'd ask him to do, would best suit his talents. You just get to, from scratch, say, this is what we're going to do for Jordan. What does that look like? What are the positions you're putting him in to succeed?
From an offensive standpoint?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking me? Yeah. I think he's very well prepared and, quite frankly, excited to get into an offense to where, if he was here, what we would have done is played much more like we played at Utah State our first go-around, where we did put more on the quarterback, and we asked him to go through his progression read. And it wasn't a field-based read offense at that point. It was much more of a progression read. Allow him to have some freedom at the line of scrimmage, like we did when we were here before. We had Chucky Keaton as he went through his progression. He had a little bit more opportunities and, do those things, which he's going to need to do in the NFL. So he's great in the offense that he played here, right? And it is that system, and there's great coaches coaching that system. I'm just a believer in when you have a guy like Jordan that can do so much, let's do all we can to, first of all, surround him with great players, right? We all know that if he's not surrounded with great players, then he's going to be an average quarterback, especially in the NFL from what I see in the NFL. Again, never coaching in it, but he's ready to take the step of being having more control, I would say, pre-snap in a football game, and I think that'll be a great challenge for him and a great opportunity to continue to grow in those areas. And he did a lot. He did some of that in the system. You know, he would change up routes and do things by basis on an off corner, an up corner, too high or single high. But I think he's ready to take a big step in that area and grow.
Thanks, Coach. I appreciate you taking the time.
You bet, man. Okay.
All right, thanks to Gary Andersen for coming on the show, 3 years ago. He was great. And I think it's I thought about, okay, let's reach out, let's get him again. But it was fresh in his mind, and he was pretty candid, I thought, about Jordan Love. And I appreciated that about the interview. So I thought really good stuff there. And I think it's important that we sort of circle back to what the situation was at the time and what the upside is. Hearing him say, I think he'll be a better pro than he was a collegiate player because he can handle so much more at the line of scrimmage. Well, that's exactly what Aaron Rodgers was asking for. Let me do more at the line of scrimmage. Well, if Jordan Love has got the football IQ to do that, then they don't even really have to change anything about this offense. Now, they can, change the structure in that they can focus on some of the more LaFleurian principles, but they can also give Jordan Love some of the same autonomy that Aaron Rodgers got at the line of scrimmage and feel like you can still get yourself into a perfect play in a way that maybe with other quarterbacks you couldn't. Just, I think, some good info there. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes. From free agency to the draft, salary cap management, and more. Join NFL experts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino as they take you through what it's like to build an NFL franchise through Monday through Friday. Find Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll be back tomorrow. Plenty more here on Locked On Packers. It sounds like this is, I always want to say we're close to a trade because it seems like that. And then I hear, oh, it's going to happen today. It's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen this week. And then it doesn't. And you try and figure out why, and it just is frustrating. So I'm not going to make any more predictions. Just not. For the moment, follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to come hang out with us live, like when Aaron Rodgers gets traded, you can do that on our Locked On Packers YouTube page to stay Locked On Packers.